Executions, 5 deaths and 2 murders.
I know, and now we're going to have an alien abduction eventually.
Are they your teeth? You're running them in for the dog.
Absolutely, running them in for a dragon, I think. This one has a walk-on part of the audience, if you're up for it. I always play a really nasty old man in this one. And at one point, I'll come before you, and I'll say, which of you is Tippin G? Tippin G, come to me! And the correct reply is...
The children, they laughed and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G too.
Now, we always say about these two things, there are two things about this story. The louder you are, the scarier I will be and the funnier the story will be. And there's also something rather embarrassing. You might have noticed I have quite a loud voice. Try not shout me? Let's try it again. Which of you is Tippin G? Tippin G, come to me!
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted,
I'm Tippin G!
She's Tippin G! We're all Tippin G!
And we've got an extra incentive. You've got to try and out-chat storytellers as well. I think we're about ready to begin.
So do I.
Really?
Just about.
Right. Now, this is a story about a girl called, as you might have guessed by now, Tippin G. And it's a story from Haiti. Now, Tippin G, she lived with her stepmother in her father's house because her father had died some time ago. And she was really good, although she was only about 8 or 9, she was really good at cooking and cleaning, gardening, housework, DIY, you name it. And that was because her stepmother did not like her very much. Now one day, when Tippin G was out at school, her stepmother found the cupboard was a bit bare, so she thought, got to make some money. Well, in that case, what better thing to do than boil up some sweets to sell in the marketplace? But of course, to boil up the cauldron, she needed some wood for the fire. But when she went to the wood pile, it was bare. She used it all up without noticing. So what could she do but go to the forest and look for some more wood? So she went to the first part of the forest, and there all the wood was dry as tinder. Absolutely no good at all, it just crumbled away. So she went into the middle part of the wood, where the villagers came less often, and there the problem was the opposite. It was all mouldy. It all had wet rot instead of dry rot, and that crumbled away as well. Absolutely useless. So she went and found herself in the middle part of the forest, where the villagers almost never came. Miles from any human habitation. She hadn't seen anyone now for ages. But there she found all kinds of logs that were absolutely perfect, and plenty of kindling too. And she gathered it all up, and gathered it, and gathered it. And once it was piled, she roped it all up, and once she'd done that, there was far too much for any one person to ever get back to the village alone. And so she called, just on the off chance, friends, is there anyone here who could help me get this wood back to my village at all? Silence. Not a twig snaps, there was not a breath of air stirring, not a bird sang, not a twig or a leaf stirred. But she looked at the wood and she was quite greedy, she didn't want to leave it all there. And just totally on the off chance again, she shouted, is there anyone here who could help me take this wood back to my village?
I will help you, my dear.
And to her amazement, a strange, writhen, twisted old figure came out from between the trees.
But I will have to be paid. Can you pay me?
Of course, my dear sir. I'm sure we'll think of something when we get the wood back to my village.
All right. Don't think you can trick me.
Of course not. Of course not. And with a dreadful ease, he shouldered the whole huge burden on his back and took it, all by himself, back to the village. Now, when the wood was safely stowed in the pile, he came up to the stepmother and he said,
my dear, payment is due. What have you to give me?
Now she thought quickly, and quick thoughts are sometimes not the best idea. But of course she'd been going to the marketplace to make sweets because she hadn't any money, she'd run out. So she thought and she thought and she thought, and an idea, probably a very bad one, occurred to her, and she said, what about a servant?
What, you?
No, my dear sir, not me. I've got a stepdaughter. She's quite young, but she's very good at cooking and cleaning.
A child?
Everything.
To dwell with me as my slave in the forest.
Yes.
All right. But I can hardly collect her here, can I now?
No, my dear sir, that wouldn't be so good. Yes, well, she's called Tippin G, and every day after school, the children always gather by the riverbank at the ford. And, yes,
She's called Tippin G, but how can I recognise her? All children look the same.
I'll make sure she's wearing a yellow dress.
Yellow tomorrow, called Tippin G.
Yes,
I will be there.
of course, my dear
My
sir.
dear.
Of course. Well, when the old man left, the stepmother was feeling uncomfortable about this already, but a bargain is a bargain. But as we've said, Tippin G, she was a canny lass, and while this conversation had been going on, well, she'd come home from school. And hearing that her stepmother had a visitor, she'd crept past that room, but she'd come back and started listening when she'd heard her own name spoken in such real accents. So it was that night, after her stepmother went to bed, she went round to the bedrooms of her friends, because they all lived in one-storey buildings, and she knew which were their windows, and she knocked on their windows. And she said, tomorrow, 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 if you love me, wear a yellow. If you love me, wear a yellow dress. And so the next day, when the old man came to the ford, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the children seemed to be in yellow.
Which of you, little dearies, is Tippin G? Tippin G, come to me.
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G.
No! Which of you is Tippin G? Tippin G, come to me!
The children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G.
No!
And so, when the old man came back to the stepmother's house, he wasn't best pleased.
My dear!
Yes?
All the children appear to be called Tippin G. They're all in yellow! Don't think you can trick me!
Of course not, my dear sir. Coincidence, coincidence. Tomorrow she'll be there and she'll be wearing a purple dress. Yes,
Purple! Tomorrow!
Yes.
I will be there.
I promised. Well, the stepmother was feeling even more uncomfortable about this, but a promise is a promise. Now, Tippin G, after the incident at the ford, she'd run home, she'd been listening, and that night after her stepmother went to bed, she went out to the houses of her friends and she knocked on her bedroom windows and she said, tomorrow, 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 if you love me, wear a purple dress. If you love me, wear a purple dress. And so the next day, when the old man came to the ford, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the children seemed to be in purple.
Which of you is Tippin G? Tippin G, you belong to me.
The children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G.
No! Which of you is Tippin G? Tippin G, you belong to me.
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G. For this time, when the old man came to the stepmother's house, he was even angrier.
My dear!
Yes?
All the children in this village are wearing purple. They all say they are Tippin G. Don't think you can trick me this way.
Of course not, my dear sir, tomorrow, and she'll be wearing a black dress.
Tomorrow I will be here.
I swear
And I
it.
will have a slave. One way or t'other.
I swear it. And this time the stepmother was feeling even worse, but some oaths cannot be broken. But Tippin G, she'd run home, she'd been listening, and that night, after her stepmother went to bed, she ran out to the bedrooms of her friends, and she knocked on their windows and she said, tomorrow, 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 if you love me, wear a black dress. If you love me, wear a black dress. And so, the next day, when the old man came to the ford, all the children of the village, including all of the boys, were in black.
Which of you is Tippin G? 'Cause Tippin G, you are mine, you hear? Mine!
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G.
No, which of you is Tippin G? 'Cause Tippin G, you are mine for all of time!
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin G, she's Tippin G, we're all Tippin G.
No!
And this time he came to the old...
My dear, all the children in this village are called Tippin G. They all wear black. You belong to me.
And so it was. The stepmother was taken away by the old man of the forest, and nobody ever heard any more what happened to her. But that night, there was Tippin G. She was left alone with her and her father's things in her and her father's house, and as we've already said, she was great at looking after the house already. What difference would it make to her? And that night she invited all the friends around and come together to save her bacon, and as the fun waxed at its height, the children, they laughed and they clapped their hands and they shouted,
I'm Tippin G. She's Tippin G. We're all Tippin G.
Thank you. We have been visiting your storytelling theatre. Please like us on Facebook. That's the end of the storytelling session for a little. Thank you.
Right, we're going to have about a 15-minute break and then we're back with you.